Hi, I'm Alisha John, and I'm a PhD student in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology at the University of Michigan. I study some pretty fascinating pieces of DNA that I'd like to spend a couple minutes telling you about today. But before I do, I need to make sure that we all start on the same page and go over some background info. All living things have DNA, and this DNA contains all of the instructions needed for their body to function. Genes are pieces of DNA that influence traits such as eye color, hair color, height, or metabolism. Genes often do this by making a protein, a tiny molecular machine that has a specific job in the body. But not all DNA serves as instructions for making proteins. Therefore, many scientists believe that this other DNA might just be junk that isn't important. But is this DNA really junk? What if it simply has a function that's different from making protein? Well, we now know that some of this DNA regulates when, where, and to what extent a gene is turned on or off. So some of that junk DNA is actually very important regulatory DNA. Think of these pieces of DNA as dimmer switches for our genes. Each gene in your body is controlled by its own genetic dimmer switch. That means that you have over 20,000 dimmer switches in your body. Our dimmer switches need to turn genes on at the correct time, in the correct place, and at the correct level for us to grow up and be healthy. After all, our heart and our brain need different sets of molecular machines to function properly. Scientists know that changes to the DNA and genetic dimmer switches can contribute to disease and other developmental problems. For a really striking example, let's look at a fruit fly. So this is a normal fruit fly. I'd like you to notice that large red eye. And this is another fruit fly. Do you notice anything different about them? Do you feel like the second one is staring at you a lot more? In the second fruit fly, the genetic dimmer switch that controls eye development is turned on in places where it's normally turned off. This makes the fruit fly develop extra eyes all over its body, which is kinda creepy. So we know that changes to genetic dimmer switches can contribute to disease and other developmental problems. And this isn't just in fruit flies, this is in humans too. But what we can't do is look at a genetic dimmer switch, these regulatory pieces of DNA sequence, and know which gene they control, or how they control them, or what happens or doesn't happen if that DNA is changed. Therefore, we need scientists to study these regulatory pieces of DNA to learn more about them. And that's exactly what I'm doing. My research focuses on one of these genetic switches in fruit flies so that we can better understand them in all living things, including humans. The particular genetic switch that I'm studying is part of the reason that two species of fruit flies are very different in terms of color. One is light yellow, while the other is dark brown. The change in color between these two species is caused, at least in part, to changes in the genetic dimmer switch of the gene that makes brown pigment. The brown species has a genetic dimmer switch that turns that gene on really high, and the yellow species has a dimmer switch that doesn't turn that gene on nearly as much. What I'm trying to do is find the specific change in the genetic dimmer switch sequence in that DNA that is making the brown species brown and the yellow species yellow. By finding this change and how it's working to make these fruit flies different colors, my research will help us better understand our own genetic dimmer switches and how they contribute to human growth, health, and disease. Well, thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned something new today. Be sure to check out some other Relate videos for lots more cool and nifty science.